Okay, thank you all very much. Um, well, there's not going to be anything for me to reflect on if we don't have some kind of conversation. So let's see if we can take another step. Yeiter mentioned our friend Herb Lovett and his predictions. And here is something that he said. In the earlier part of this century, by which he meant the 20th century, we believed that the new behavioral sciences, with a cunning scheme of rewards and punishments, would remove difficult behaviors effortlessly. I think that dream is dead. I hope so. I hope that we have come to a point in our history where we have started to recognize that the end point of pure thought is probably death, that we are not going to think our way out of these situations, that we require a new respect for the irrational, the intuitive, and the felt. We are discovering that we need people who step out of the mold of what we have created to remind us who we are and who we need to be for one another. And as Ed said in his introduction, something odd has happened to this idea, which is different from Herb's hope and prophecy. One of the people who taught me an enormous amount is a man who was institutionalized for 60 years and found his way into a version of community life that was not as different from institutionalization as he had hoped. But Tom Allen wrote an autobiography at great pains because Tom's communication was extremely difficult to understand. And one of the things that you can get from his autobiography is sort of what the heart of the institution is. And there are 12 things that he got interested in, that he had to offer us, but I just want to focus on one for a minute. He says, the institution wants to control you completely. If you study carefully how it controls you, you can find ways to defeat them, right? So one of the things we got to figure out, it seems to me, is how come this particular technological approach has such stickiness, right? Has such staying power. What happened that kind of diverted a fair amount of our field and leaves us with high cost, not only dollar cost, but high human cost plans that are cranked out by people whose relationship to people, whose appreciation of people's situation is entirely filtered through this very narrow rewards, punishments, consequences kind of understanding of humanity. How did this, what makes this so sticky? What makes it so attractive to the field and to many, 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 many families? What do you think? What?
Okay. Did you say my name?
Go for it.
I think it's scale. I think it's the principles of scale, and everything is done on a group level. And so, I mean, my experiences with teachers in school, so they always argued that you can't single anyone out. Everyone has to follow the same rules. And so the whole idea of the individual education program was not really accurate, and no one ever thought it was strange that these individual education programs had to fit within a structure that was mass produced, and it had no individuality whatsoever. I think the other thing that someone already mentioned was the financing apparatus really pushes this stuff on you. I mean, my son gets propositioned for therapy, for behavioral interventions, for social emotional training, and all of this stuff is presented as a good idea. And I say, I don't think he needs any of that. I really don't. I mean, I'm not sure if it's not within a relationship, I'm not sure how you teach those things. So we've always stayed on a very small scale because of that. And everything else seems to be on this huge scale. And when I was in the system going to, so I'm a parent, I was also a para professional and advocate. And so I would go to trainings, and the main training everyone needed for certification was the crisis prevention and intervention, CPI training. And that crosses fields. I also worked in a mental hospital where that was required as well. But when they presented it, they called it restraining training. And I took offense to that. And, you know, I said, this is backwards. It's supposed to be prevention, you're not focusing on the least desirable result in getting anywhere. And that was an indoctrination from the top down. I mean, I'm just a parent amongst all these teachers, and well, they didn't think I was very important at all. So that was very discouraging to me to see that.
Thank you.
I think that we've never really had the sense that all people are human beings. And it just doesn't start from now. It's years upon years upon years where people with disabilities were called idiots, stupid. That comes from the top. It's just trickling down, but just calling them something different, which lowers the quality of life of that person. So if I don't think that person is a human being, well, then they're not going to be treated as a human being, because you don't treat a human being in certain manners. And I think that the problem is people are not considered human beings, right? And so if I don't consider you a human being, I want to treat you like what I consider you, which is less than that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think related to that, our people are viewed as problems. You know, so the problem isn't within the environment or the relationship, or the problem isn't me. And you know, it's always easier to point fingers at other people and think that they have to change. You know, people are resistant to thinking, well, maybe I have to change, or I have to do something different. So it's kind of related to that. And the other thing is, in terms of rewards and punishments, and I'll just speak for in the United States, from a cultural point of view, that's how we raise our kids. I didn't, but most of the people I know raise their kids using punishment and rewards. That's all they know. You know, other cultures, you know, certainly may be different. I work with some Africans, and then some African cultures, you know, they look at it completely differently, and they don't use that. And I think because we're so used to it and socialized into it, that people just revert to it because it feels natural. It feels like, you know, that's the way I was raised.
You know, I was just thinking that, you know, if you've got a son or an individual you're supporting that's, being really difficult, I mean, who do you call? And I think I was just thinking personally, maybe we dropped the ball, I mean, because the behaviorists just kept going. And so who do they call, and who is the federal government? I mean, if there wasn't behaviorists, maybe this is a stupid question, but who would there be? I mean, there's a few people in the general teaching realm. There's a few people like John and Michael Kendrick and some of the, social role valorization folks out there. But, in terms of behavior, I don't know, like there's no profession, right? I mean, how would you, I don't even know. I don't think SRV is taught in colleges or universities, is it? Does anybody know for sure about that?
I think it's in Canada, isn't it?
Yeah.
In Canada?
Depends
Yeah.
where you are.
Yeah. In
SRV?
Alberta, in
Okay.
Calgary, I thought that they were teaching SRV there.
What is SRV? Sorry.
Oh, social role valorisation.
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
And actually, Yeiter, I think who they call is, well, in a school context, is the parent. But it's all about come and get your child because they're out of control. There just doesn't seem to be that model for reflection on how the people around the person can reflect on, well, what can change in the environment? How can I approach things differently? And what can we focus on? Like you sort of teach, and your approach, Yeiter, is find the role, don't focus on what you don't want to happen, move away from the behaviour. And there's just, well, in Australia, certainly, even in the schools, it's just so prevalent, the whole focus on bringing in the therapist to fix the child because they're the problem. And I guess that's that whole focus of devaluation, that the person's the problem, they need to be fixed. And it just perpetuates it. It just continues, and the wounding continues, and they become ascribed with this menace role. They're dangerous to be around, and it's so incredibly damaging and disheartening. And even for, so our son has an intellectual disability and can't always predict sort of consequences of, what's going to happen. And I think that is not understood. So it makes it very difficult for him to navigate the world and be supported in making decisions. But I just, that devaluation and the focus on the fix-it model is just so incredibly prevalent, and it's a big money maker here in Australia. Therapists are getting paid up to $300 an hour. So why would they get rid of that? And our funding scheme absolutely endorses it and thinks that that's absolutely where we should be putting the money. So it's and that's what we try and do at Imagine More, is try and help families see what a typical life can look like, and how do we counteract this really strong push to fix the child. You have to be pretty strong and resilient, and that's exhausting as a parent.
And the systems, all systems are made to facilitate that model, the medical model, and from education to health to all the basic things you need to live your life practically runs on that model. So when a family is choosing the path of inclusion, it's like a really uphill battle rather, with lots of barriers and very poor support. So it's a hard road to travel.
I think it's very rooted in the self-perpetual nature of institutions as well. And if you follow the money, and the institutions have been scrambling to reinvent the words, so reinvent the wheel, and really they're changing the words without really changing the system. You know, it comes down ultimately to all those people when they deinstitutionalize, trying to keep their jobs. And I don't know, I find hearing, I'm in Canada, that it's almost like inclusion has become this excuse not to see the special nature of the people we serve. And I like to see the special in everybody. So, and ABA doesn't apply then, right? But it's trying to design a system that one size fits all, and we all admit that it doesn't. I don't know, just my thoughts.
Mhm.
I think there's a big issue in terms of attitudes. You don't have a high IQ and you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer, you're kind of worthless. And if you have any defect, you're kind of worthless. And people don't want to get to know people who are different. So then there's this simplistic stuff that's kind of mechanical. I will venture to say some of the positive aspects of it can make a shift. And I was thinking of in my doctoral program, counseling parents of a kid who did anything right. And they found little things, and their assignment was notice it and write it down, and the list got longer and longer, and the kid got better. So sometimes simplistic stuff will help, and they may listen to or reason with a kid who is cooperating more. Another piece is ABA and autism. There's a big move in early intervention. I guess psychologists supposed to magically do a quick and dirty evaluation and make determination. And of course, if you're autistic, you're supposed to get hours and hours of ABA. They don't know about Greenspan stuff or any of the other positive things. So it's available, it's funded, it's for many hours. Therefore, the concept must be good.
Just to talk about why ABA became such a big thing in the autism world, it's a way to distract families. I believe, as a family who has a person with autism, it's a way to distract families to focus on the therapy aspect and telling them that that's the only way. So families don't have time to even look outside, and that's the only thing the governments will fund. And so families don't want to even have the time to explore anything else. And by the time families realize that, oh, this is not working, or not working as well as we were promised, it becomes a little bit too late. So they're playing catch up. I spend most of my days trying to tell families that I'm not saying everything about ABA is wrong. Some concept, some of the teachings or the goals are right goals. Just the way we go about them is not realistic, because there isn't anyone in the real world who's going to reward your child because he just achieved the goal. It doesn't work. And that's what ABA is all about. So, but by the time a young family realizes that, it's been 4 or 5 years of them living the dream of ABA is going to fix my child. and we're playing catch up now, and we don't know what to do. And I just feel like there is a disconnect between what the funding model is doing and what families are doing, and this is a way to just numb the needing society.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would be curious to know if anybody knows anybody that's actually experienced success of a ABA program. I have a friend down in Florida that did a lot of work with adults and some kids in schools, and he couldn't think of a single case where people knew that there was a behavior plan, that they understood how to implement it, or that it was actually being implemented or engaged or was working. And I've never seen it. I mean, I've probably worked with 50 or 70 kids in public schools, and I always came in on the heels of behaviorists not being able to make things happen. And it blew my mind that they miss so many obvious kinds of things, like maybe the person is bored or wanted a little more control in their life, or like the real basic things that we've been talking about. You know, listening to somebody, they have no concept of that. But I mean, there's this huge thing that's being funded for people on autism. Is it actually working? I mean, is anybody evaluating it? I can't believe that it is, but they keep getting funded. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent probably, but makes me crazy.
Let me just see if I'm keeping up here for a minute. We've mentioned several things that are really important to consider. Some of them are cultural, if I understand it right. So if we look at the way, at least, that some of us experience our cultures, rewards and punishments make sense. It's a straightforward, your grandma would give you this kind of advice, right? So it has a familiar ring to it, and at the same time, it's been made exotic. It's been made into something highly specialized, something credentialed, something that's got a lot of aspects to it, a lot of theoretical stuff around it. So there's that kind of two-sided puzzle. On the one hand, it's natural enough, and on the other hand, it's got this kind of shine of professionalism, and it's got a white coat on. So that's sort of one piece, if I've got it. Another aspect of this is that the people that we practice on are at great risk of being seen as other, as not whole human beings. And in that sense, and I'm not sure, Marietta, if this fits with what you were saying or not, but what it made me think of is it's pretty important to have that otherness in there, because it's not, as Marietta pointed out, it's not something that we do to each other, right? We may do it to kids, but we don't do this in polite society to real people. So there's something we got to defend ourselves against. We're doing something that seems wrong. And so it drives the sense that inscribes menace on people, inscribes differentness on people. And the more different somebody is, and the more we perceive them as less than human and as dangerous or threatening in some fashion, the more we're justified in treating them in ways that that may make us uncomfortable and make it a little hard for us to stop and look more closely at ourselves and what we're doing. It also puts the burden of change somewhere else than on us and on the systems and structures that we create or represent. And so the idea, there's also a sort of a distance or an impersonality about it. I don't really have to see the special in you. I have to determine through functional analysis what the function of your inappropriate behavior might be, so that we can kind of get a handle on it. But I don't have to see the special in you. I don't have to have any kind of depth of relationship, which relates back to this question of scale and a question of, you can apply it to a lot of people. And that relates as well to a question about, who do you call? If most of the practitioners that are available to you, that are presented to you by a system, are representing this particular perspective on human beings, then where's the rest of us? And the rest of us may be pretty busy trying to assure that people experience the good things of life, which, as you point out, is achievable, but takes substantial energy all by itself. And so there's at least a sense that we're doing something here. And we're doing something that lots of other people sanction. Interestingly, the National Institutes of Medicine produced the standards of care for people identified as autistic. And ABA is the only appropriate treatment. It isn't completely established because there haven't been enough blind, double-blind tests and so forth, but that's it. So in the US anyway, our sort of official stampers of the Good Housekeeping seal have stamped ABA. And at least in Australia, I might be able to make a couple $100 an hour doing this. And I've got a built-in design that says small people who have many, 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 many hours of compliance training. We have a study that Ira Lovelace did a million years ago that suggested that if you do all that to a little kid, by the time they get to kindergarten, 5 times out of 9, they're able to join the regular kindergarten. So we have science to back it up. Is that kind of tracking what we're
And
saying?
that's actually, John, that's what they have focused on, is that early intervention. But I heard a term last week at a conference called the polished pathway. And so once you're in that early intervention, I can guarantee you are not going to end up in the mainstream school. You know, that pathway that leads to the special school and then the special day program and then the special group home. It's just seamless. And rather,
I was thinking, as somebody was talking about the roads to these different places, Jack made a poster quite a long time ago that suggested that the road to inclusion was narrow and uphill. And the road to segregation, social exclusion was wide and well paved
Yes.
and well maintained.
Mm.
So what else comes to mind if we're trying to figure out how to respond to this this way of thinking? The other thought that I had, by the way, is in my own very early work in a big institution, it did work for a very narrow range of skill training kinds of activities. It worked to take people who had been horribly neglected for years and years and years, and who were unable to navigate the trauma that they'd been exposed to. And it put us in a relationship where we had some room to hope that people could change and we could have a part in that change happening. And so there is as long as you keep the targets narrow enough, that you can make it work. It just doesn't have the capacity to help people achieve, or to help us achieve, the kind of communities that we'd like to be. Herb's words also kind of rang in my ears when I was listening. We require a new respect for the irrational, the intuitive, and the felt. That's all this stuff about relationship. Is hard to bureaucratically structure and manage. So we've got big forces pushing us. What occurs to you as ways to kind of loosen the grip?
Yeah, I have something that's a sort of a side comment. I find I read a lot online on Twitter, and what I am confused about is that I don't think my son has ever done ABA, other than there's this preschool that was pretty rigid about some things, that like he's only allowed to have so many minutes with the dolly he liked and things like that. But he's also severely intellectually disabled. And when I read about condemnations of ABA, a lot of them extend to like training people to do anything is bad. And I don't really know what to do with that in the context of, for example, over the pandemic, we spent many months teaching my son how to open a can and how to open a bottle with a bottle opener. And the point of that was that he can go to rather than asking for permission to get a drink, he can go to the fridge, get a drink, including a beer. You don't keep too many beers in there because he doesn't understand alcoholic, but like he can go to the fridge, have his choice of drink without having to ask me. But that was a heck of a lot of painstaking step-by-step training. And a lot of times when I hear ABA condemned, it's sort of like, these are not dogs, you shouldn't train people. I'm sort of thinking like, for people who are severely disabled, like getting him to do things that he wants to do, it's a heck of a lot of step-by-step painstaking training. And so I end up being very confused about what exactly is being condemned, because I think also people in some areas, people rush to, like they say, ABA is bad without understanding what that is, and then sort of extending it to all parts of training. And maybe they're thinking about somebody who's maybe mildly intellectually disabled, and so could probably be able to determine what they wanted to learn and learn it on their own, maybe. But I feel like for someone who is going to need a heck of a lot more help doing things, even when we're aiming at things that I think they want to do, my son wants to do. Like I'm trying to teach him how to do a shower so he can be a guy that doesn't have to have his mom shower him, like, you know, all those kinds of things. They still require pretty painstaking training to get to. Now he can like get up in the middle of the night, I look and he's drunk all the bloody the margaritas and bloody Caesar mix. It's like, you know, gotta make sure there's aren't too many of those in the fridge. But still, it's kind of like, you know, some men drink alcoholic drinks before breakfast. You know, whatever. Do you understand the question? It's sort of like I don't know I don't know how to distinguish the bad things that we're talking about versus the things that I think some people need in order to help build a life that's meaningful to them, because they couldn't possibly take that on their own.
Sure. One of the things that I would notice about what you've said is there may be a difference. There certainly, in my experience, would be a great case to be made for systematic instruction for people to learn things that matter to them. And again, your example of being able to go get a beer seems like a valuable thing, right? So you're not training people to comply. You're teaching somebody how to do something that you've decided is useful and meaningful for them. Seems like that's one way to differentiate the two.
But I still
That's a
am
point.
deciding, like I like the deciding about what, like there's still somebody pulling the strings, maybe. So that's why I'm kind of
Well,
like.
But if I understand it right, your sense of your son is one that says he is counting on you to interpret what good things he wants in his life, right?
Yeah, well, I don't think he's not consciously counting on it, but I mean, that is the intention, is trying to give him ways of figuring it, of expressing what he wants and making it closer to happening.
Yeah. What his consciousness might be is anybody's guess, I suppose. But anyway.
Okay. Well, anyway, that's a frustration I have in some of these discussions, because I'm never sure what exactly people mean when they say AB. Like there's, like, I understand what some of the most regimented part is, but a lot of times when I'm hearing conversations with people, I think they kind of mean anything and everything. And sometimes it's hard to have a really rigorous discussion when you're not actually sure which parts of it people are condemning, or everything, including, you know, training somebody painstakingly.
I think it might be different too when you're looking at where, like a program, like where I work, and a family home. I feel like ABA is all day long, totally what we're supposed to be doing. It becomes so repetitive and so meaningless that when you have employees who've worked in a program for, like, say 20 years and they've known these same guys for 20 years, to me, I want to shake things up. I want them to look at it differently. And I struggle with, because I'm running a program, I need to follow the company line, basically. And we hire behavioralists to come in and do analysis and to give us programming to work with our people. But that's not about our people. It doesn't seem to be about them to me.
Mhm.
You know, we're pushing them into employment jobs that they don't want to do, you know, because they got to fit into the government's decided path. And they don't fit, and we're trying to put round pegs in square boxes. And I think we got to stop thinking about it from our point of view and think about it from theirs. I don't know. That's my feeling.
Definitely, Heather. John, I'm conscious that Rima's had her hand up for some time.
Oh, thank you. I just want to say, I am somebody who's BCBA certified, that I've done, not proud, but went to university and did ABA for many years at Sacramento, California. And what I learned is the problem, why we're having an issue with ABA, and why I believe when I tried it with my son it didn't work, is because we remove the child out of the problem. The child is not the center, exactly what Heather said. And it's really so systematic. Like, we believe that a child should learn these tasks this way, the only way, and they should generalize them in a certain way. And task analysis is not bad. What you described, Karen, I think it is a task analysis. You took a skill and you divided it and you taught it to your son, and he mastered it, and now he can get a drink on their own. Amazing, fantastic. We all learn to cook. I had to learn to do certain things, and I was taught by my mom or a friend or whatever, and I had to learn that way, and that's a normal way of teaching. But the problem when it comes with people with disability, we remove them out of the equation completely. And the only way we can become successful as parents, as people who work in the field, is putting them in the center. So personal centered thinking, seeing what they're capable of doing, and and moving forward. And I think this is what ABA is missing. It's missing, where is the child at and what they would like to learn. And we remove that completely out of the equation. And every center I know in Toronto that does ABA, and I go in there and I work with them, the child's interests are not taken into place. It's a regiment, it's a curriculum, and we're going through it. And if they don't do it, then we're going to add more hours and the family has to spend more money. And that's the way it's done. And that's the problem.
Mhm. Ed, got your
Yeah.
hand up.
Yep, I just wanted to, I guess I'm going to say, recognize that Rima said a few things that I was going to say, but ABA or task analysis or any other methods to teach skills, I don't have a problem with that, where it's teaching functional skills like opening things or cooking or whatever. But there's a lot more to life than that. And where I find ABA, behaviorism all fall short, again, is it changes the nature of the relationship with the person. And to me, those are the things that really matter. Not whether you can open the bottle, all right, that's important, but being able to be with people in a way which is meaningful. And so if you think about one of the assumptions that ABA folks have is that there's 4, maybe 5 basic motivations for human behavior. So the complexity of human behavior is like ignored. And it's, you wouldn't even apply this to yourself. And so that all behaviors are, so that anytime someone is exhibiting some sort of challenging behavior, it's looked at as a negative motivation. So, it must be because they want attention, or it must be because they want maybe a sensory input or whatever. But, and then, so it takes it out of the realm of seeing the whole person, just saying, again, getting back to that, the person's the problem, and that it's always negative. Like things like maybe the person just wants to feel cared about or just wants to feel loved. So that's why they're doing it, or maybe that the fact that the person's unhappy doing the kind of work that they're doing. They don't want to do that kind of work. I think last time I told a little story where, I'm an expert at using behaviorism. I don't use it anymore, but I'm pretty good at getting people to be on task and in their seat doing boring work that they don't want to do. So it just doesn't make sense. So I think it's to me, the ABA stuff is where it starts infringing upon relationships and the way you look at people. So if I'm just going to teach a skill to somebody, like how to make a sandwich, it's no big deal. But where it infringes upon this kind of the emotional life of people.
Just go ahead and jump in.
Eddie?
Oh, thanks. I think I always have to back up below what the goals and the tasks are and think about the ground rules. So when I train people to work with my son, I teach them that there is a balance of power, and that balance of power is going to be equal. So the person teaching or assisting or helping in any way is going to share power with the person who's being helped. And they have to always have a plan B. So if the person that they're working with is resistant, that's honored. There's a pause. You back up and wonder why there's a resistance. You offer a different choice. There's always a different choice. So that doesn't fit well into a school model usually, and it doesn't fit well into a lot of program models usually, because you don't have control over the plan B. And that's the point. You're not supposed to have, the total control is not yours. And when we do that, we don't have as many power struggles. And yeah, we can still teach skills, but it's with the caveat of having the other person have a say.
Thanks, Betty. I'm just gonna, I just want to reflect on something that Ed said on that relationship building. And I've found that with my daughter, Setmi, who's autistic and has limited communication, verbal communication, we found that when we did ABA, we did practically all evidence-based therapy with her. But we didn't do a whole lot of ABA, but we've done quite a lot. And we found that she doesn't respond to it simply because there's no choice for her. There's no respect in her respect for her wishes. And most of the time it's like not authentic, like asking her to switch on a light 10 times to figure out whether she knows how to switch on a light is probably the worst way to teach her to switch on a light. So, as opposed to, we've been trying something called relationship development intervention. Again, it's a therapy, but it's very authentic and it's about building the relationship. It concentrates on building the relationship and building her flexibility in thinking, and hold very high expectations of her, where the model thinks that, you know, she is able to expand her dynamic thinking, even though she is challenged with a disability. So that gives such a lot of freedom for that person, and you know, challenges them to keep growing. So yeah, just wanted to reflect that, like tell that story, I guess. And yeah. John, the floor is yours. I don't think anyone has a raised hand.
Thank you.
Could you, somebody tell me how to do that? I've been wanting to raise my hand, but I don't, where, how do I?
You go to
Just raise your
reactions.
Yeiter, like this, go like that.
Yeiter. You can always do this.
Well, I'll just do it this way, okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Much better than the electronic
See,
version, Yeiter.
that's
Go ahead.
One trial learning.
Yeah, I got it now.
So did you want to say something, or did you just
Well,
want to know how to raise your hand?
it's not a big point, but you know, one of the things that drove me crazy from the beginning of my work in this field was that I figured that people that had mental retardation or intellectual issues would need teachers around them. It just seemed to make sense that they have difficulty doing things. And then I ran into Mark Gold, and it's like, you know, way back in the 60s, he was teaching people to drive cars and do circuit boards and all sorts of, you know, the systematic instruction you mentioned. And my experience has been that I rarely find anybody that knows how to teach. And or anybody that's teaching people how to teach, you know, and so I mean, how maddening would it be to you know, be trying to learn how to, you know, open a bottle or spell your name, you know, and it's going to take like years. I worked with one young lady that it still couldn't spell her name after 11 years, you know, and they were still trying, and it was driving her crazy, and she was beating the hell out of the people that were trying to make her do it. But I guess, you know, where I get a little confused sometimes with ABA. They get into discrete trials and all that sort of fluffy talk, but you know, the effective teaching part, I just don't see. I haven't witnessed it. I mean, in the special ed, my wife is a special ed teacher, and I asked her, I said, did you ever learn how to teach? And she said, no, they don't teach you how to teach. When you go out in the field and you do whatever they call it, you know, as a teacher, you work in a school for a while with another teacher that probably never learned how to teach. And you know, if I was somebody with a intellectual disability, it would be maddening to go to school, you know, and not be able to figure things out, and nobody knows how to teach. Anyway, that was my rant.
If I could, I wanted to, if I could just take a stab at answering your question, John, like how to change it, or what to do about it. So one of the things that I do is I sit on a committee for an organization that reviews behavior plans, and most of them are ABA. And so the thing that I do is I challenge people, getting back to what motivates that person's behavior. I challenge people. So sometimes it's ridiculous, like when someone says that person's hallucinating because they're attention seeking. And I've seen that more than once. I've seen that many times. I'll just challenge that. Well, what do you mean by that? You know, and I just, you know, if they say, well, they're doing that for just attention, anything for attention, I'll just say, well, what, you don't think they get enough attention? And I start trying to dig down. And when you know people, sometimes you know a little bit more about their emotional life. I just dig down with these ABA therapists and try to dig down, and you know, at some point they start going like, oh yeah, maybe that could be, you know, maybe you're right, you know, oh yeah, maybe they're raising their yelling and all that is because nobody's paying attention to them. They just want to be heard, you know, and that makes them feel good to be heard, makes them feel in control, yeah, or they want to be in control of their lives. I just try to dig down, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes the light bulbs go off and people will work a little bit, but they really have trouble breaking out of the model. That model brainwashes you. I mean, it must, for anybody to think that you're hallucinating for attention. I mean, it just defies all logic. But if you go in that with that model and you use like the motivation assessment scale, that's what you come up with. So anyhow, that's one thing that I try to do that people can try.
Mhm. So by emphasizing relationship, by emphasizing an identification with people, that this is not some sort of other creature, but somebody who is as complicated as I am, as you are, rather than somebody whose situation and struggles can be summed up in for motivations or whatever. That seems important. A kind of common sense test, like what exactly is the reason for multiple light switch commands, following multiple light switch commands, if it isn't just to assure your compliance rather than do something that's meaningful and functional. Noticing that we can get in a trap, as with a formal program, which is shaped by behavior analysts and results in people who've known each other for years and years and years, going through a set of what almost sounds like rituals, right? It's our time now to work on signing your name or working on your resume or doing whatever it is. And if you've done that quite a number of times already, it's kind of hard to understand exactly what is the meaning of this. It seems like another dimension that we've spoken about is the importance of some kind of fundamental ground rules that address power, that address the how power is distributed in the situation. And one of the advantages that some behavioral approaches have is that's not in question. We are not equals. You are the patient, the client, the whatever, and I am the therapist, the trainer, the whatever the right word is. I'm up, you're down. I talk, I give instructions, you follow the instructions. And again, that has a certain common sense to it. But we got to figure out how to disrupt that common sense in the name of human faces. And what for me is one of the most difficult things about some of these simplistic approaches is we even call them tools sometimes. So one of the reasons I don't like to call things that have to do with approaching people in a way that centers on them as a person. I don't like to call those things tools because I don't like the idea of the relationship that's implied by that metaphor, right? I've got the tools and you've got the loose nuts and bolts or whatever. So we've got several things that are sort of important ways to respond. And at a larger scale, it seems to me like we're kind of stuck. Not just us few people here tonight, but that the world is kind of stuck around some of these questions. And the profoundly hopeful bit is that there are people who are creating a better pathway that uses less violence, that's less depersonalized, that's more relational, that's more aimed at a good life in ordinary community roles and settings, that's focused on people becoming who they are wanting to become. So we've got people who are doing this, and we need to figure out how to keep on doing it and also to spread it. Because we do know, as Ed was saying, that there was a time there when it seemed like the tide was going our way. And it didn't get too far, but if we think about it and work on it, maybe we can find a way to make it happen again. I see a hand up. here we
Yeah.
go.
In terms of looking at the person, if there are things that you're seeing an interest in or possible an incompetence in, it's less needed to guide the person in doing it, or it may be a lucky guess. Years ago, a kid who was completely out of it, not focusing on much, I had a gut sense he might be able to feed himself because he wasn't focused and I didn't really have a relationship. I just guided his hand twice. And he completed the meal, and a week later he was scraping his plate clean. No one had a behavior modify that. So finding the next step. And another piece in terms of inclusion, the model I saw growing up was nobody had disabilities. One school had a segregated class, and we saw them in the playground, but they kept to themselves, so that by having kids segregated, it means they're not one of us, and people don't learn that these are people. So it's hard to go from not doing it, and people think that they don't belong over there.
Okay. Well, I think that brings us just about to our time. So Erosha, you've got something to
Yes, I've just got a
survey?
quick poll, yeah, a little survey about our book club and its future. So if everyone can just take a few minutes to quickly complete it. It's very short, five questions, very simple. Yeah, I think Yeiter would be appreciative of the responses from everyone.
Great. Well, thank you all very much for an informative evening. Appreciate the chance to spend a few minutes with you and to hear a little bit about your understanding and experience. So thanks everybody very much.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Very much for your time and for being kind enough to come and share your wisdom with us.